Did you really think nobody would notice? Gavin Rhodes asked softly, and the entire private dining room went silent. The silver serving tray slipped from Emma Carter's hands a second later. Crystal exploded across the marble floor. Red wine splashed over a leather portfolio worth more than her monthly rent. Her black apron twisted around her waist as she froze beneath 100 watching eyes. Then Gavin reached forward, tore the silver name tag from her uniform, and said, "You're fired." The tiny piece of metal struck the table with a sharp metallic click. Somehow, that sound felt louder than the breaking glass. 3 hours earlier, Emma had been standing alone in the employee locker room, staring at her reflection in a scratched mirror. The fluorescent light above her buzzed faintly. Her black uniform fit perfectly everywhere except across her hips. It always did. She smoothed the fabric anyway. Old habit. She had spent most of her life trying to make herself smaller. Smaller voice, smaller presence, smaller appetite, smaller everything. At 31 years old, she still apologized when strangers bumped into her. She still stepped aside first. She still carried the quiet belief that if a room became uncomfortable, somehow it was her fault. The silver name tag pinned above her heart read Emma in neat engraved letters. There was a small crescent-shaped scratch across one corner. She rubbed it with her thumb. The mark had been there for years. "Big night tonight," another waitress said while applying lipstick. "Investors, politicians, billionaires. Don't drop anything." A few people laughed. Emma smiled politely. She was used to jokes like that. By 6 o'clock, Moretti House was glowing beneath crystal chandeliers and warm amber light. The restaurant occupied the top floor of a historic Manhattan building overlooking the river. Wealth lived differently here. It arrived wearing tailored suits and watches worth more than apartments. Emma moved through the room the way she always did, quietly, present but unnoticed. She refilled wine glasses, adjusted silverware, cleared empty plates before anyone asked. The guests barely looked at her. Most never remembered her name. Near 8:30, she carried a tray of Bordeaux toward the private investor room when something caught her attention. Not a conversation, not a face, a sound, a soft electronic chirp. Her eyes drifted toward the service hallway. The restricted archive corridor sat beyond a gray security door rarely used during dinner service. Above it, a small access scanner blinked green. Once, twice, then darkness. Emma slowed. The archive room should have been empty. More importantly, nobody except upper management was authorized to enter. A man stepped from the corridor moments later. Gavin Rhodes, general manager. Perfect suit, perfect smile, perfect timing. He nearly walked into her. "Emma." His voice was warm enough to sound kind. "Long night." "A little. You work very hard." He smiled. That's a rare quality these days. Most people would have heard a compliment. Emma noticed something else. Gavin's breathing was uneven, and tucked partially beneath his suit jacket was a white receipt folded twice and shoved carelessly into his pocket. "Enjoy the evening," he said before walking away. Emma watched him disappear into the crowd. She should have forgotten it. Instead, she found herself looking back toward the security door. The scanner was dark now, silent, normal. But 10 minutes later, while delivering wine to the investor table, she noticed something that made her stomach tighten. Sitting half-hidden beneath a chair near the service entrance was a crumpled delivery receipt. And across the bottom of the paper, directly beneath a timestamp from that evening, was Gavin Rhodes's signature. Emma turned the receipt over in her hands as the sounds of dinner service drifted through the wall behind her. Laughter, glasses clinking, a piano somewhere near the front dining room. The ordinary noises of a successful night. Yet the small piece of paper felt strangely heavy. Gavin Rhodes's signature sat at the bottom in dark ink beneath a timestamp of 8:17 p.m. She checked the corridor clock. It was nearly 9. 20 minutes earlier, Gavin had been standing inside the investor room charming people worth hundreds of millions of dollars. According to the schedule posted in the manager's office, he was supposed to have been across town meeting a vendor before arriving late. Emma folded the receipt and slipped it into the pocket beneath her apron. Something wasn't adding up. 10 minutes later, she returned to the service station carrying a stack of dessert plates. Steam rolled from the dishwasher behind her. The smell of coffee and melted butter hung in the air. Usually the rhythm of work calmed her. Tonight, every detail seemed louder, more noticeable. The pastry chef cursed under his breath. Someone dropped a spoon. The host's stand phone rang twice before stopping. Emma glanced toward the investor room just as Gavin emerged. His smile appeared exactly where it always did, effortless and polished. But his eyes swept the restaurant before settling briefly on the archive hallway. Not long, less than a second. Still long enough for her to notice. Gavin saw her looking. "Everything all right, Emma?" he asked pleasantly. "Yes, sir." "Good." His smile widened. "I'd hate for you to worry about things that don't concern you." The words sounded kind. They landed like a warning. He continued walking. Emma felt cold despite the heat pouring from the kitchen. An hour later, the dinner reached its most important moment. Investors gathered around a long mahogany table while contracts waited beside crystal water glasses. Emma moved quietly between chairs refilling drinks. At the head of the table sat Luca Moretti. He rarely spoke during meetings. He listened. Most people mistook silence for disinterest. They were wrong. She knew because she had watched him for 3 years. A man who noticed everything never needed many words. As she passed the service station, her old phone vibrated inside her locker. She almost ignored it. Almost. During a brief break, she checked the screen. One notification. Payroll alert. Someone had modified her shift log. Emma stared at it. Her schedule showed she had clocked out for 36 minutes the previous Friday. She hadn't. She remembered the entire shift because she had worked through lunch after covering for another waitress. She opened the timekeeping app again. Same entry. Same missing 36 minutes. Her stomach tightened. Later that night, while clearing empty espresso cups from the investor room, she noticed another detail. 2 cups sat near Gavin's seat. Both still warm. One carried lipstick on the rim. Neither appeared on the final bill. Emma said nothing. She simply memorized the table number. Across the room, Luca Moretti watched her pause beside the cups. "Something wrong?" he asked. The question sounded casual. Emma hesitated. "Maybe nothing." Luca held her gaze. "Maybe isn't nothing." She looked at the cups, then at Gavin laughing with an investor near the bar. "The records around here don't seem to match lately." Luca said nothing after that. He merely glanced toward the table. But as Emma walked away, she saw him reach down and photograph the receipt printer log with his phone. 20 minutes later, the security office reported a technical issue. One camera had stopped recording. Not the dining room camera. Not the entrance camera. The camera above the archive hallway. And according to the system report, it had gone dark exactly 3 minutes after Gavin Rhodes appeared beneath it. The camera had gone dark exactly 3 minutes after Gavin Rhodes appeared beneath it. Emma stared at the security report glowing on the monitor in the back office and felt something settle heavily in her chest. Not certainty. Not proof. Just that uncomfortable feeling that arrives when scattered pieces begin drifting toward the same shape. The security technician shrugged. Probably a software glitch. He clicked through screens and yawned. Happens all the time. Emma nodded politely, but her eyes remained on the timestamp. 3 minutes. Not 2. Not 5. 3. The exact window between Gavin leaving the archive corridor and entering the investor dining room. Too precise. Too clean. The technician left for a smoke break. Emma returned to work. The restaurant had quieted after midnight. Chairs were being turned upside down onto tables. The scent of roasted garlic and expensive wine lingered in the air. Somewhere beyond the kitchen doors, a floor buffer hummed against marble. She carried a stack of linen napkins toward the employee hallway and paused beside the scheduling. Bored. Her payroll alert still bothered her. 36 missing minutes. Most people would have ignored it. 36 minutes wasn't enough to start a fight over. But Emma had spent years surviving paycheck to paycheck. She knew exactly where every minute of her workday went. She pulled out her old phone and opened the photo gallery. Hundreds of forgotten pictures filled the screen. Grocery lists, recipes, utility bills, her mother's prescription refill reminders. Then she found what she was looking for. A photo she had taken 3 Fridays earlier. Not because she wanted a picture, because she needed proof the walk-in freezer had been leaking again. The image showed a puddle spreading across the floor beneath stacked produce crates. In the corner sat the kitchen wall clock. 1:42 p.m. Emma checked her payroll entry. According to the system, she had already clocked out at 1:18 p.m. She zoomed in slowly. Her own reflection appeared faintly in the freezer door. Wearing her apron. Working. Present. Her pulse quickened. The missing 36 minutes hadn't disappeared accidentally. Someone had removed them. Still here. Gavin's voice appeared behind her. Emma nearly dropped the phone. He smiled when she turned around. Calm. Friendly. Perfect. Long night. A little. His gaze lowered briefly toward the phone in her hand. You work too hard, Emma. The words sounded concerned. Almost fatherly. People who work as hard as you sometimes start seeing problems that aren't really there. She slipped the phone into her pocket. Maybe. That's a healthy attitude. He smiled again. Not every discrepancy means something. For a moment neither spoke. Silence stretched between them. Gavin's expression never changed, but his eyes seemed to sharpen. Then he reached into his jacket and adjusted something inside the pocket. Emma caught the faint edge of folded paper. White, narrow, like a receipt. He wished her good night and walked away. She watched him disappear around the corner. 10 minutes later, she found herself standing alone near the archive corridor again. The building felt different after closing. Bigger, colder. The blinking green scanner above the security door reflected faintly across the polished floor. Emma crouched beside a trash receptacle near the hallway entrance. Something white had caught her attention. She reached inside and pulled out a crumpled delivery invoice. Wine inventory. Date stamped 3 weeks earlier. The same date as the freezer photo. The same date as Gavin's Boston business trip. She unfolded it carefully. At the bottom sat Gavin's signature. But that wasn't what made her stomach tighten. It was the second signature directly beneath it. The name belonged to a vendor who had officially stopped working with Moretti House almost 8 months ago. The vendor had officially stopped working with Moretti House 8 months ago. Emma stood alone beneath the dim hallway lights staring at the second signature until the cleaning crew rolled a cart around the corner and forced her to fold the invoice away. Her fingers tightened around the paper. Something was wrong. Not strange. Not unusual. Wrong. The next afternoon, she found herself sitting outside the executive conference room on the 32nd floor. The room overlooked Manhattan through walls of glass. Gray clouds hung low above the river. Inside, lawyers, department heads, and board members moved around a polished walnut table worth more than her annual salary. Emma felt out of place before she even entered. People like her usually came into rooms like this carrying coffee trays, not questions. A senior attorney finally opened the door. Ms. Carter. His smile was professional. Polite. Empty. We'll only need a few minutes. Inside, every chair seemed designed to remind visitors who mattered. Emma sat at the far end. Gavin Rhodes sat near the center. Relaxed. Confident. Immaculate. Beside him rested a leather folder. Across from him sat Luca Moretti. Silent as stone. No expression. No visible opinion. The attorney folded his hands. We're simply reviewing a few inconsistencies. Gavin nodded sympathetically. Emma has always been dedicated. Sometimes dedicated employees notice things that appear concerning without understanding the larger context. He looked directly at her. That's not a criticism. It's actually admirable. A few people around. The table nodded. Emma felt herself shrinking beneath their approval. Not because Gavin was insulting her. Because he wasn't. That was what made it hurt. He wasn't calling her stupid. He was politely explaining why nobody should take her seriously. You found an old invoice? The attorney asked. Emma placed the folded paper on the table. Yes. And you believe it means something? Gavin leaned back slightly. The vendor's company name still appears in several archived systems. Old records surface all the time. His voice remained warm, patient, the voice of someone helping a confused employee. It can be difficult to interpret administrative documents without context. Silence settled over the room. Heavy, professional, humiliating. Emma suddenly understood why powerful people preferred conference rooms to arguments. Nobody needed to raise their voice. The furniture did it for them. She looked down at the invoice, then at the payroll screenshots on her old phone, then at the men and women waiting for her to surrender the moment. Maybe, she said quietly. Several shoulders relaxed. Gavin smiled. Then Emma slid another document across the table. Can someone explain this first? The room paused. It was a delivery log, one she had requested from storage an hour earlier. Gavin's smile faltered for less than a second. Almost nobody noticed. Luca did. Emma watched his eyes move toward the page. The vendor supposedly stopped working with us 8 months ago, she said. But their inventory codes appear here 3 weeks ago. Nobody spoke immediately. The attorney adjusted his glasses. Gavin reached for the log. Too quickly. He caught himself halfway through the movement and settled back into his chair. Small. Barely visible. But Emma saw it. So did Luca. Interesting, the attorney said carefully. Gavin chuckled softly. Probably a clerical error. Maybe. Emma nodded. Then why was my shift log edited on the same date? The room became very quiet. Not shocked. Not convinced. Just quiet. Luca still hadn't said a word. Yet for the first time since entering the room, he wasn't looking at Emma. He was looking at Gavin. The manager smiled again. Calm. Controlled. Coincidences happen. His answer sounded perfect. Almost. Because as he spoke, his phone lit up on the table beside him. A message preview flashed across the screen for less than a second before he flipped it over. But Emma had already read enough. It wasn't a name that appeared. It was the exact inventory code printed on the delivery log lying in front of him. The inventory code remained burned into Emma's memory long after the meeting ended. Most people would have missed it. A random string of letters and numbers flashing across a phone screen for less than a second. But waitresses survived by remembering details other people ignored. Table numbers, wine labels, faces, voices, tiny things. The next morning rain tapped softly against the windows of Moretti House while Manhattan disappeared behind a wall of gray clouds. Emma arrived early carrying a canvas tote bag and the same old phone she had owned for nearly 6 years. The charging port barely worked. The screen was cracked in 2 corners. Most people would have thrown it away. She kept it because old phones remembered things new phones forgot. Downstairs, the restaurant hadn't opened yet. Chairs still rested upside down on tables. Coffee brewed somewhere beyond the kitchen. The building felt suspended between night and morning. Quiet enough to hear your own heartbeat. Emma waited near the employee entrance until she saw Luca Moretti step from a private elevator. He wore a charcoal overcoat darkened by rain. 2 men followed several feet behind him. Security. He noticed her immediately. Of course he did. "You're early," he said. Emma reached into her bag. "I found something." She handed him the phone. Luca didn't take it right away. His eyes moved from the device to her face. Something or another coincidence? The question wasn't cruel. It wasn't kind either. Emma appreciated that. "You decide." Silence stretched between them. Finally he accepted the phone. She opened an image folder. Hundreds of ordinary photos scrolled past. Utility bills. Grocery receipts. A birthday cake. Then she stopped. This one. The image looked unremarkable at first. A shipment delivery photographed months earlier during inventory reconciliation. Stacked wine crates. Loading dock. Employees moving in the background. Luca stared for several seconds. "What am I looking at?" Emma zoomed in. Not the crates. Not the workers. A reflection. The polished side of a delivery truck had accidentally captured the archive corridor entrance through an open service door. The image was blurry, imperfect, yet one detail remained visible. A man holding a security keycard. Gavin Rhodes. Luca's expression didn't change. That almost worried her more. Date? He asked. 3 weeks ago. The same week. Emma nodded. The same week. Luca enlarged the image again. Then again. His thumb stopped moving. For the first time since she'd known him, he went completely still. Not distracted. Not thinking. Remembering. Emma recognized it because she had seen customers do the same thing after hearing terrible news. Somewhere inside the photograph sat a detail connecting itself to something older. Something he already knew. What? She asked quietly. Luca didn't answer immediately. Rain whispered against the glass. The coffee machine hissed in the distant kitchen. Finally he looked up. That keycard. His voice had lowered. That access level belonged to only 3 people. Emma felt her pulse quicken. Gavin.
No.
Another silence. Longer this time. Gavin shouldn't have had it at all. Before she could respond, footsteps echoed from the corridor. Gavin appeared carrying a folder beneath one arm. Perfect suit. Perfect posture. Perfect smile. He slowed when he saw them together. Just slightly. Good morning. His voice sounded pleasant as ever. Am I interrupting? Luca handed the phone back to Emma without taking his eyes off Gavin. Not at all. Gavin's smile remained intact. Yet something flickered behind it. Something cautious. I hope we're not chasing ghosts now. He laughed softly. Sometimes old records create stories that aren't really there. Luca studied him for another second. Then asked a question so mild it almost sounded harmless. Gavin, when was the last time you saw Daniel Mercer? For the first time, the manager didn't answer immediately. And Daniel Mercer was the man whose name had been attached to that keycard before he died 2 years earlier. For the first time, Gavin didn't answer immediately. The pause lasted less than 2 seconds. Most people would never have noticed it. Luca Moretti did. The silence settled between them like cold smoke. Gavin's smile returned first. Daniel Mercer? He repeated lightly. I haven't thought about him in years. Dead men usually ended conversations. This one didn't. Luca nodded once. Interesting. Nothing in his voice revealed what he was thinking. That was the dangerous part. Gavin offered another polite smile, excused himself for a meeting, and disappeared down the corridor. Emma watched him go. The moment the elevator doors closed, Luca's expression changed. Not anger. Something colder. Calculation. Come with me. 20 minutes later they sat inside a private office overlooking the rain-soaked river. Gray water. Gray sky. Gray city. The kind of afternoon that made Manhattan feel tired. A lawyer named Richard Hale stood near the window reviewing personnel files. An investigator from Moretti Holdings sat across the room with a laptop open. Nobody raised their voice. Nobody panicked. The room felt quieter than that. More dangerous than that. Luca placed Daniel Mercer's employee file on the desk. Open access records. The investigator obeyed. A series of dates appeared. Badge scans. Entry logs. Archived security reports. Luca studied them in silence. Emma sat near the end of the table feeling completely out of place. Her old phone rested beside her hand. A crack ran through the corner of the screen like frozen lightning. Nobody had asked her to leave. Nobody had asked her to stay either. She was simply there. Watching. Listening. The investigator frowned. This doesn't make sense. Luca looked up. Explain. Mercer's access card remained active for 11 months after his death. Nobody spoke. Rain tapped softly against the glass. Somewhere in the office, an air vent hummed. The lawyer lowered his reading glasses. That should be impossible. The investigator clicked through another screen. Not only active. Used. Luca's gaze hardened. How often? 37 times. Emma felt the room grow colder. 37 wasn't an accident. 37 was a pattern. Another report opened. More timestamps. More entries. Most occurred late at night. Some happened during major investor events. One happened 3 weeks ago. The same week as the invoice. The same week as the photo. the same week as the missing payroll records. Luca stared at the screen for a long time. Then he asked a question so quietly everyone leaned forward to hear it. Who approved keeping the card active? The investigator swallowed. Gavin Rhodes. Silence. Heavy. Unmoving. The lawyer closed the file slowly. Not shocked. Concerned. Like a man realizing a crack in the foundation might run deeper than anyone thought. Across the desk, Emma looked down at her hands. Her fingers were trembling slightly. She pressed them together beneath the table. Luca noticed. What? He asked. She hesitated. I don't want money. Both men looked at her. Emma swallowed. If this turns out to be what I think it is, I don't want a settlement. I don't want a bonus. I don't want anyone paying me to forget. Her voice stayed steady. I just want the truth written down correctly. Nobody spoke. She thought of years spent apologizing for mistakes she hadn't made. Extra shifts accepted because hospital bills never stopped arriving. Managers deciding which employees mattered. Which names were remembered. Which names disappeared. If somebody lied, she said quietly, then the lie should stop. Luca looked at her for several seconds. Then he nodded once. Nothing more. The investigator opened another archived folder. Security footage requests, internal reports, maintenance logs, hundreds of files. One document appeared near the bottom. The investigator frowned again. There's another problem. Luca's eyes narrowed. Go on. The archive hallway camera didn't fail once. He clicked open the record. It failed 17 times. The room went silent. 17 separate outages. Every outage occurred within 5 minutes of Daniel Mercer's access card being used. Luca stared at the screen without moving. Then his gaze shifted toward Emma's cracked phone lying on the desk. And for the first time, he realized the woman everyone treated like background noise had been paying attention longer, and more honestly, than the man he had trusted for nearly a decade. The woman everyone treated like background noise had been paying attention longer than the man Luca Moretti had trusted for nearly a decade. The realization lingered long after the meeting ended. Not because it embarrassed him, because it explained too much. The missing camera outages, the dead employee's access card, the altered payroll records. Individually they were problems. Together they looked like intent. 3 nights later, rain shimmered across the windows of the private executive lounge above Moretti House. The room glowed with amber light and old money. Leather chairs, crystal decanters, paintings worth more than most apartments. Gavin Rhodes sat comfortably near the fireplace reviewing quarterly reports while 2 board members discussed expansion plans. To anyone watching, it looked like a normal evening. Luca intended it to look that way. Across the room, a sealed manila envelope rested untouched beside a glass of bourbon no one had tasted. Gavin's eyes drifted toward it twice in 10 minutes. Luca noticed both times. He noticed everything now. Gavin, Luca said quietly. The conversation stopped. Not because he raised his voice, because he almost never interrupted anyone. Gavin looked up immediately. Yes. Luca slid a file across the table. Small issue. Gavin smiled. Of course. The file contained copies of security access reports. Nothing new. Nothing explosive. Mostly information Gavin already believed he had explained away. He skimmed the pages confidently. Looks like old maintenance errors. Luca nodded. Probably. Silence. Gavin relaxed slightly. Then Luca asked, walk me through it again. A harmless request. The kind powerful men asked every day. Gavin began speaking. Calm. Professional. He explained the inactive vendor records, the payroll discrepancies, the archive access issues. His story sounded polished. Too polished. Across town, Emma sat in her small Bronx apartment with her old phone plugged into a charger held together by tape. A tiny television murmured in the background. Her mother's medication. Bottles sat lined neatly along the kitchen counter. The radiator clicked and hissed against the cold. She wasn't in the lounge. She wasn't listening. Yet part of the trap belonged to her. Earlier that afternoon Luca had asked one question. What bothered you first? Emma hadn't mentioned the dead access card, or the payroll edits, or the cameras. She had mentioned something smaller. His words. Luca frowned. What words? Emma thought for a moment. Every time Gavin talked about the archive corridor, he called it the West Hallway. And nobody calls it that. Luca had stared at her. How do you know? Because employees use the East Service corridor every day. The archive entrance is north. We all know that. She shrugged. People remember places they actually walk through. Now, in the lounge, Luca listened carefully as Gavin continued explaining. Then it happened. Small. Almost invisible. Gavin pointed toward a diagram included in the report. The West Hallway camera failure happened during routine maintenance. Silence followed. Heavy. Immediate. One board member looked down. Another reached for his drink and stopped halfway. Luca said nothing. He simply looked at Gavin. The manager's smile remained in place for half a second too long. Just enough. West Hallway? Luca asked softly. Gavin froze. Not visibly. Not dramatically. Just a slight hesitation behind the eyes. The kind people couldn't control. Archive corridor, he corrected. Sorry. Long week. Luca nodded once. Of course. Nobody else understood why the room suddenly felt colder. Gavin continued talking. Yet his confidence seemed thinner now. More careful. Across the polished table, the untouched envelope remained where Luca had left it. A simple test. A simple phrase. One wrong name. 20 minutes later, when the meeting ended, Gavin rose to leave. He reached the door before stopping. His hand rested on the brass handle. Across the room, Luca finally slid the envelope toward himself and opened it. Inside sat a printed photograph from Emma's old phone. The delivery truck reflection. The access card. The timestamp. Gavin saw it from the doorway. Saw exactly what photograph Luca was holding. And, for the first time since this began, he understood something far more dangerous than evidence. Emma Carter was no longer standing alone. Emma Carter was no longer standing alone. Gavin understood it the moment he saw the photograph in Luca Moretti's hands. He left the lounge with the same polished expression he wore every day, but something had changed behind his eyes. The confidence was still there. The certainty was not. 2 days later, the private investor dining room filled again. The same room. The same crystal chandeliers. The same polished walnut table. The same place where reputations were built, contracts were signed, and inconvenient people were quietly pushed aside. Emma felt the weight of the room the second she stepped inside. Weeks earlier, she would have entered carrying a tray and keeping her eyes down. Tonight, she carried a slim manila folder. Nothing else. Around the table sat board members, attorneys, senior executives, and investors. At the far end sat Gavin Rhodes. Perfect suit, perfect posture, perfect silence. Luca arrived last. Nobody stood. Nobody needed to. The shift in the room happened automatically. He placed a black remote beside his chair and sat down. Let's begin. The words were calm, almost gentle. A large screen lowered from the ceiling. Several people exchanged confused looks. Gavin remained motionless. What's this regarding? One board member asked. Luca folded his hands. A review. Nothing more. The first file appeared. Payroll records. Before and after versions. Side by side. Time entries altered. Employee hours removed. Dates highlighted in yellow. Emma recognized her own missing shift immediately. Gavin smiled faintly. Administrative corrections. Luca nodded. That's what I was told. Another file appeared. Vendor records. Inactive companies processing deliveries months after termination. Inventory codes matching invoices found in storage. The same code that had flashed across Gavin's phone. Gavin's jaw tightened. Barely. Old database errors. Silence. Luca clicked the remote. The next image filled the screen. Emma's photograph. The delivery truck reflection. The access card. The timestamp. Nobody spoke. Gavin looked. Away first. Luca watched him. Then the room darkened slightly as video footage replaced the photograph.
Archive corridor camera.
Grainy.
No audio.
A man appeared beneath the camera, security badge in hand. Timestamp visible. Another frame followed. Then another. Then another. 17 separate clips. 17 different nights. The same access card. The same corridor. The same person. Gavin Rhodes. A board member removed his glasses. Another shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Nobody interrupted. Nobody defended him. The evidence no longer required interpretation. Then Emma stood. Every eye in the room moved toward her. She opened her folder and removed a single sheet of paper. A maintenance report. The camera didn't malfunction, she said quietly. It was manually disabled. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. She placed the report on the table. The maintenance contractor signed this after every outage. One of the attorneys reached for the document. His face changed as he read it. These signatures. He stopped. Luca looked up. What about them? The attorney swallowed. They're forged. The room froze. Not dramatically. Not with shouting. Something heavier. The kind of silence that arrives when the final excuse dies. Gavin opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. For the first time, words failed him. Luca stared at the maintenance report for several seconds. Then at Emma. Then at Gavin. A strange expression crossed his face. Not rage. Pain. Quiet pain. Because none of this happened in some distant company he barely knew. It happened under his name. In his building. To people who trusted him. He remembered Emma standing in hallways carrying trays while executives walked past without seeing her. He remembered signing reports Gavin prepared. Approving recommendations. Believing explanations. Looking everywhere except where the truth actually was. His gaze lowered briefly to the silver name tag resting beside Emma's folder. The same one taken from her. The same one nobody thought mattered. Luca reached forward and picked it up. The room watched him. He turned the scratched metal over once in his hand. Then he set it carefully on the table. Directly in front of Gavin Rhodes. Finally, he looked toward the company attorney and spoke 4 quiet words that made the entire room stop breathing. Call my attorney. The words settled over the room like falling concrete. Call my attorney. Nobody argued. Nobody moved at first. Gavin Rhodes sat perfectly still with Emma's silver name tag lying on the table in front of him. The small crescent-shaped scratch caught the light from the chandelier above. For weeks he had controlled every conversation, every explanation, every version of the truth. Now he couldn't even control the silence. The attorneys were the first to act. Files changed hands. Phones came out. Board members who had spent years trusting Gavin suddenly stopped looking at him and started looking through him. By the end of the week, he was gone. His employment terminated. His access revoked. Financial investigators discovered unauthorized vendor payments, manipulated payroll records, falsified maintenance reports, and a trail of approvals hidden beneath layers of paperwork. Civil actions followed. Regulatory reviews followed after that. The consequences moved slowly, professionally, and permanently, the way real consequences often do. But for Emma, the hardest part wasn't watching Gavin fall. It was returning to work. 3 weeks later, she stood outside Moretti House before sunrise. The city was still waking up. Delivery trucks rolled through wet streets. Steam drifted from manhole covers. She stared at the entrance for several seconds before stepping inside. The lobby looked exactly the same. Marble floors, brass fixtures, fresh flowers. Yet everything felt different. People looked up when she entered. They said good morning. Some smiled awkwardly. Others looked embarrassed. One hostess stopped her near the front desk. Emma. Her voice trembled slightly.
I'm sorry.
Just 2 words.
No excuses. No explanations.
Emma nodded. The apology wasn't perfect. It didn't erase anything. But it was real. Upstairs, payroll records had been corrected. Every missing hour restored. Every altered shift repaired. Back pay issued. Employee files amended. New oversight procedures installed. Anonymous reporting. Protections created. Luca had ordered a full audit of the hospitality group. Not because lawyers demanded it, because he understood something now. Systems don't become unfair all at once. They become unfair one ignored person at a time. Emma's mother no longer worried about medication bills arriving in stacks on the kitchen table. The company health plan had been restored correctly. Outstanding claims processed. Legal support provided where it should have existed from the beginning. Nobody called it charity. That mattered. It wasn't a favor. It was correction. One evening, nearly a month after the board meeting, Luca asked Emma to join a staff gathering in the private dining room. The same room where she had once stood accused. The same room where her name tag had been ripped away. Employees filled the space. Servers, dishwashers, hosts, bartenders, managers, people who rarely occupied the same room together. Emma almost didn't go. Then she remembered how many years she had spent leaving rooms before anyone asked her to stay. Luca stood at the head of the table. No speech, no dramatic performance, just a few pages in his hand. "There is one final item," he said. The room quieted. He looked down at the document. The official investigation found no wrongdoing by Emma Carter. He paused. The record will reflect that she identified misconduct others failed to see. Another pause, longer this time, and that Moretti house became a better place because she refused to look away. He stepped forward holding a small box. Emma recognized it immediately. The silver name tag. He handed it to her without ceremony, without pity, just respect. The scratch was still there. The same mark she had rubbed with her thumb in locker rooms and hallways for years. Once it reminded her how easily people overlooked her. Now it reminded her that being overlooked had never meant she was wrong. The room applauded. Not loudly. Not for long. It wasn't that kind of moment. It was something rarer. People acknowledging a truth they should have seen earlier. Later that night, after the last guests left, Emma sat alone near the service station with a cup of hot coffee warming her hands. Her old phone rested beside her. She never replaced it. The screen was still cracked. The battery still weak. Across the room, her clean apron hung neatly on its hook. Her name tag attached exactly where it belonged. Luca passed by on his way out. He glanced toward the apron, then toward her. "You kept the phone." Emma smiled. It remembered what everyone else forgot. Luca stood there for a moment without speaking. Then he nodded and walked away. The coffee was still warm. The lights above the dining room glowed softly against polished wood. And for the first time in a very long time, nobody was asking Emma Carter to make herself smaller so the truth could stay hidden.